I've lightly sketched out the scene and just hinted at the cloud shapes, just so that I have a bit of a guide. And always a good idea to know where your clouds are going to go and not just completely improvise on that one. I start off with raw sienna. That is often my base color, even for white clouds. It just adds a bit of warmth to the clouds, especially on warm sunny days. And then I'm mixing cerulean and cobalt for my sky color. I usually mix those two together. It gives me a bit of granulation from the cerulean and a bit of warmth from the cobalt. Again, sunny days, especially in Australia, we'll have a really deep warm blue. And then I'm painting around my white clouds. And wherever the blue touches the raw sienna, we of course get those wonderful soft edges. It's okay to have some hard edges in clouds, but even the crispest of clouds, if you look really closely, you notice that the edges are actually soft. The transition between the cloud and the sky. And I'm deliberately using a big brush, a Hake brush. It's a very soft natural hair brush, which means I can't get too fiddly with it. I'll have to stick to big shapes. And I'm just going to strengthen my blue in that top area there. Just adding a bit more pigment to the mix, reduce the amount of water. And with those big soft brushes, the brush marks will dissolve and you won't actually see them. And I'm just going to lift out a little bit of the pigment there with a clean brush, just to add a bit more white at the top. And now I'm dropping in some burnt sienna into this blue that I've got that turns it into a warm grey. And then I'm going to go and drop in the cloud shadows right away. Burnt sienna and my cobalt and cerulean mix. And again, the clouds are still very wet, as you can see. There's a big bead at the bottom of the clouds where the water was pooling. So it's all nice and soft. And then I'm going to drop in the cloud shadows. If I need a bit more precision, then I just use the edge of that brush. Yeah. It's a good idea to try different brushes every now and again. I don't use this particular brush a lot, but every now and again I'll get it out for bigger paintings. This is a quarter sheet. Doesn't work really well on a smaller size than that. I've also covered the headlands with that same grey wash, just so that we don't have too much of a transition and difference between the color temperatures and the color harmony between the hills and the sky. I'm closing some of the gaps because I don't think I actually need any white on that horizon line there. Mixing a darker grey, same colors, just more pigment, less water, and strengthen those shadows. There's a lot of water now on the paper from the raw sienna, and then we added the lighter shadow wash to it. So before I let this dry, I want to make sure that those shadows are strong enough. So while the sky is settling in, I'm gonna paint the water. And the colors are not too dissimilar from the sky, because in this case, again, the sky is reflected on the water. So same colors, cerulean, cobalt blue. And I'm just using the same pool of pigment I've got there at the top. But that would also help with the color harmony, not jumping around with too many colors. I'm a bit tentative because I just want to block it out and think about how dark I want that water to be. I want the clouds to reflect a bit in the ocean. So I don't want to go in too dark right from the get-go. I just want to sort of build it up. And I'm adding a bit of quinacridone gold to it now to achieve a bit of a green tint to my blue. And gradually darken that mix towards the foreground. Leaving some white gaps there, which is the cloud reflections. Still using my soft natural hair brush, so you can't see any brush marks. Gently filling in some of the gaps with a bit of dry brushing, just pulling that Hake brush ever so slightly over the paper. And then mix a bit more of my darker green blue color to get a bit of a vignette effect where it's darker in the foreground and lighter further away. And then clean my brush and then lift out a little bit of the pigment. This is how you can sort of go back and forth between adding and removing pigment. The clouds have dried enough that I don't risk any backgrounds. I'm now going in with just a tiny bit more of the grey color to add some more cloud shadows. Just want to make sure that there's enough contrast in those clouds. And one of the reasons that I use the same colors and pigments for a very long time in a lot of paintings is that I can remix my colors really quickly because I know which pigments to choose. So I don't use unusual mixes a lot where I go, oh, how did I do that? I didn't mix enough, because you never mix enough. You always run out of your puddles. Well, I run out of them at least. So knowing what I've mixed so I can quickly recreate it is very helpful. That's why I have my staple colors that I can use time and time again. And I'm just cleaning up my brush and just remove a little bit more of that blue from the ocean to get those cloud reflections into my water. And now mixing a light purple for the distant headland, checking that it's not going to be too damp so it doesn't run too much into the clouds or the ocean, but it did, so I used a tissue just to straighten that bottom edge there and dry that out. And then I strengthened the top of the headland a little bit with more color. And now it's time for the mainland to go in. And for that I'm mixing a muted green. I don't want it to be too bright, but I definitely want it to be more saturated in color than the distant headland that we've painted in this light purple. In the meantime, I've swapped to a mop brush. So I got all sorts today. I gotta use my brushes. I bought them, I have them. And every now and again, I just need to make sure I try painting with different brushes than what I usually do. So that's the lighter one. So there is 2 headlands actually. So I'm going to use the same idea for the colors. Ultramarine blue, quinacridone rose. That makes a nice natural green that I like. And I'm going to paint the one that's closer to us. Add a bit of indigo to it, just so that I get the right value. This is almost my darkest dark in this painting. It's going to be a little bit of shadow under the boats that might be just a hint darker. And if my green is too green, or I want to have some variation in it, then I mix a bit of raw sienna into it. That gives it a bit of warmth. And then on the flip side, darken it with some indigo. And I'm going to just carefully paint around those two little boats. But you can see that the different variations of that green creates a nice texture in the headland. We even got a bit of blending going on there between the two headlands. That's nice when those little runs happen. That just adds to the atmosphere. Okay, and then a bit more water, just so that I get different tones and slightly varied values throughout the headland. What we don't want is just one flat color. That looks too boring. And now swapping to a round brush that's clean and a little bit damp, and just lifting out a bit of pigment to hint at some highlights, just to create a bit more structure and depth into that main landmass. So that ocean has dried way too light for my liking, so I'm just going to re-wet it with some clean water, and then going to reapply some of my blue ocean color. You can see there I'm mixing it quite a bit stronger than I had in the first pass. I'm going to speed up the video a little bit as I glaze over this ocean again, just to strengthen the value. Trying to be a little bit precise around the headlands and the horizon line, and leaving just a few tiny white gaps, just hinting at some waves in the water. And then just gently brushing over with my natural hairbrush and using the edge and the corners for a bit more control. And then adding more ultramarine and indigo at the bottom and on the sides, just to create that idea of a vignette. Then with a clean brush, just lifting off a little bit of the color to get some cloud reflections. Time to define the boats, and I'm using one of my smaller brushes. This is a synthetic round brush. I think it's a size 6. You can see it there. Escoda. Definitely one of my favorite brands. The quality of their brushes is quite extraordinary, so I do like using them. And I'm just going to carefully paint in the lower parts of the hulls in a darker color. So we do need a little bit of contrast in the painting. You know, there could be white boats, and probably were white boats, to be honest, but I decided to paint them darker. And then pop in a window or two, just like that. And then while that's still a little bit wet, just with some water, softening that bottom edge, and at the same time creating the shadow on the water surface, as well as a slight reflection of the boat. With the same dark color, I'm gonna hint at some further boats and maybe a few buildings in the distance, and to strengthen the contrast between the land and that little white strip there that's my little harbour in the distance, I'm going to add some more of my dark green and smudge it with my fingers just to create a bit more texture. And then a shadow line at the bottom of the headland, a few trees. right into the detailed work now, just to finish off that painting. We're nearly there. Another reason I'm re-wetting this is so I can scratch out some more buildings, roofs out of the wet area with my palette knife, just to create the illusion of that there are people living over on that side of the headland. And now with some white gouache on my brush, straight from the tube, I'm going to do the masks, couple of dry runs, and then a straight line up, well, a wobbly straight line up, but that's good enough, it's a painting. And then for a bit of counter change, we put the top half of the mast dark against the light sky, whereas the bottom half is light against a dark background. This is kind of an optical illusion, but this is how we see it in real life. So next time you're out, have a look at anything vertical, like a mast or a telegraph pole or something like that, and see how it looks light against a dark background and dark against a light background. And that's how we paint it. A few birds circling those little boats, just for some movement. Random marks, they don't have to look like birds at all. And then for the last time I'm going to touch the water, just a bit more dark blue, gently dry brushing that for some additional texture, just to create that dark edge at the bottom, which will help us lead the eye up into the center of the painting. And I'm ready to take off the tape. Always satisfying seeing the finished painting, the white border around it. And here's a finished painting. And if you made it this far in the video, of course I would love you to like and subscribe to my channel and check out the description for some more links.